It's so great to say that we get to talk a little bit about drag racing here on Burnout. Drag racing that's actually happening. Not drag racing that's happened years ago or what we think it's going to look like in years to come, but drag racing that happened this past weekend. Of course, we're talking about the COVID-8, Donald Long's big but kind of little production down at Orlando Speed World Dragway, the house that Ozzy and Maria Moya built. Whale of a weekend. We had Radio versus the World, kind of a limited invite only type of feel, as well as Pro 275. Mike, Alex, let's start at the top. Marcus Burt takes out Sean Ayers in the final. We saw Marcus Burt have to race his teammate, I believe, in the semifinal round. A pair of 360s up on the scoreboard with Marcus narrowly edging out Stevie Fast Jackson. What'd you make of the whole deal, Mike?
Right out of the gate, I just thought of, like you said, the small limited invite only. It's match racing from the 60s and 70s, man. It's totally cool. Very small, compact show. I know they were there. They started testing on Wednesday, but the show itself was Friday night, Saturday night, and I think that it's fun. It's reminiscent of what used to be and what should be. I think a small scale production, I think is a great concept to go with right now.
I do too. I mean, I don't know where you stand on this, Alex. You've been a part of these big events like Drag Week where there's 300-400 cars or whatever. But I honestly think that there's something, again, to learn from what we're seeing right now is that you don't need 37 classes to put on a suitable show. I mean, I really think that Pro 275 and Radio versus the World this past weekend, I mean, I heard zero complaints. It was a whale of a show, great racing. Granted, you're contending with some downtime or whatever when you have that few of cars, but still, just from a promoter's perspective, man, it's a little bit of a breath of fresh air because it's just more manageable, right? From every angle, it's more manageable.
You're like grounding it back to the roots of drag racing, of, it's car focus. Like you're saying, like it's like Mike said, actually throwing it back to 60s match race stuff. Like you invite the best of the best, get them on the track, and you focus on the cars and the racing and a little bit less about everything else going on. I think that's
less noise on the ground, so to speak, figuratively. No, I mean, the racing was fantastic. I mean, really tight show. I'm more concerned with that there were no twin turbo cars. I know, that to me, I know Woody had wadded up his car a week earlier, and obviously they're getting that fixed. But
even with him, that's one.
That's one,
right?
And yeah. I think that's that alarms me a little bit. I've always liked the turbo stuff, but it's the diversity, and I think I'd like to see more of the turbo guys getting in on some of that action.
I don't know if there was a complete, hard limit, Mike, on the amount of cars that entered Radio versus the World. But I was actually, in the nature, for the sake of fair reporting or whatever, I was shocked that, I saw Donald through the week trying to kind of beat the brush for participation. Hey, anybody want to enter? And they lost a few cars. Yeah.
You lost Bryson, you lost Woody. So you lose a couple of guys, and it's nobody planned on going to Orlando. It's not like it's around the corner for some of the Texas racers or in the Midwest. So, I think seeing him saying, "Hey, who else can come?" I mean, he wanted to fill and have a great show, and I think the accidents were more of I think the problem there than anything else.
Well, interesting perspective. I've said last week on the show, excuse me, that it felt like Radio versus the World was. I don't know that it's over. Obviously, it's not over, but I definitely think we're late in the life cycle of this class. It's defied all odds, in my opinion. It has been lightning in a bottle for years and years and years. But I just thought with the pent-up demand, with so many, what appeared to be so many racers looking for places to race, I just thought we would see a little bit more. Obviously, we saw some cars get torn up in recent weeks, but I just thought that there would be – I really thought Donald would be turning people away and not asking for participation.
There's championships on the line, right? I'm sorry, Alex, but Rivenbark, right? He's focused on Pro Boost Championship, right? And Hobbs down in Texas with the old Ferris car, same deal, right? He's in Pro Mod trim, and he's going to run for a championship down there. So I think you look at some of that stuff, and like you said, it is kind of late in the life cycle. People are making that choice, like, hey, look, I want to go for a championship. There's no championship offer over here. And I'm going to go over here and chase after that. So, and get off on the right foot, right? First race of PDRA is super important, especially in this intense schedule that's coming up. I'm sorry, Alex.
No, you're fine. You're fine. it's kind of going back, but correct me if I'm wrong. There wasn't one of the big famous Donald Long payouts at COVID-8, correct? Or was there?
True. No,
There
it
wasn't.
was. I mean, what was the final payout?
I think it was like 20 or 25 grand, which
that's still a big payout, but
it's still a big payout. But comparatively speaking to his $101,000 and $50,000.
So does that go back to kind of like what we were discussing, previously? Our racer, like you would expect them just to be out there racing to race, and I don't know. I find that part interesting to me. The fact that like you're saying,
I literally had this discussion just this morning with the promoter, and I was like over the phone, like trying to do anything I could to get his attention, because he was trying to figure out how little he could charge and how much he could pay. And I just tried to remind him that that's the problem. That is, those type of situations aren't sustainable, right? Promoters have to make money, right? There has to be some profit motive for them to keep doing it. That's the only way we're going to see the events get better. There'll be bigger trophies or a better track, is that someone along the way had to make some money. And I hope that I've been saying it for weeks now, but I do think we're going to see an overall resetting of racers' expectations. It feels like a lot of forms of drag racing, like we're doing this, kind of level, slow and steady growth. The payouts were going out, the payouts were going up, up, up. And then kind of like in the late 2000s, 8, 9, 10, the ADRL payouts started going through the roof, and everything, there was all these crazy outlaw 10-5 races happening. And it just seemed like the expectations almost overnight went from 5,000 was a lot of money to I'm not getting my car out of the trailer for less than 50. And it just felt like an unwinnable situation for promoters. And I know you hear a lot of people talk about the resetting of our whole world and society as a whole, kind of getting people's heads right. And I hope that some of that translates or transfers over to drag racing, because I think we got, like, in some regards, like too big for our britches a little bit. That like, hey, paying this kind of money is not sustainable.
I think it's Nitro in the 60s, right? There are no new ideas. I'm always a firm believer of that. But there were guys flamboyant, like Donald's approach, and a bunch of them back then. You talk to old school guys like a Gene Bergstrom who works with us. And he'll tell you the stories of the cash, the clear case, people parachuting in. Remember for like the Bud shootout with the 100,000 in cash. I mean, there were these shows and flamboyancy that went with it, and just like that, I mean, that cycle kind of works itself out, because, like you said, at the end of the day, it's a business. And if you say, well, if I'm going to get held at a gunpoint to pay $50,000 to win, I can't afford to do that. Well, I'm just not going to run the class. And then what happens is all these places just start falling off for opportunities for these guys to race. So, I mean, there has to be a reasonable expectation from both sides as to, a fair payout, but also sustainable to keep people in business.
Let's transition to Pro 275. This category, I feel in some ways, and Donald and I have had this conversation off the record, I've always asked him, if Radial versus the World is your top fuel, what's your funny car? Right? And it felt like there was an opportunity for X275 to be that, but I believe Pro 275 has dived into that role as a perfect complement to Radial versus the World. I think we could have some discussions about Pro 275 maybe in the future, but talking about this past weekend specifically, we saw Mark Mickey and Jason Carter in their now legendary blue Chevy Malibu reset the record, 382 at 203. On 275 series drag radials. It's just
I felt like this weekend was its coming out party. I felt like it really, for me, solidified its presence in the market, with a lot less noise around it. Right, it had Radial versus the World, which we know is king, and then Pro 275, in my opinion, really did shine. For me, a lot of it, personally and selfishly, is the real cars. I just love Mickey and Carter's Malibu has always been one of my favorite. Ziff Hudson with his Mustang, Roger.
Scored the win, right?
Yeah, he won. You know, Richard Holder, runner up with that, beautiful Nova, twin turbo Nova. And I think there's a lot of neat cars and personality, like a Pat Musi is talked about on the show. There's personalities in there. And I think Pro 275 really took a big step, I think, in solidifying itself as, like you said, the funny car of radio racing.
My closing note on Pro 275 is I think we got to rename this thing, guys. Like I just, you've got Radio versus the World over here with this like incredible kind of big name, and then you have Pro 275. And my vote right here and now before we wrap up is like Pro Street, something, Real Street. I don't know. It needs some sort of name.
Dust off Outlaw Drag Radio. Dust off that name. That's the original name of how this stuff went big, and I think these cars are the epitome of how this started.